Leo Panitch. I want to thank you all for coming out for another launch of the Socialist Register. And this evening's a very special one because we're also launching David Minnelli's book on the global slump, published by PM Press. We're going to run the evening as a brief introduction to a couple of the essays in this year's Socialist Register, and then we'll have a bit of a question and answer discussion period, not for very long. Then we'll have another interlude with some Son et Lumiere that we prepared in advance of David's book launch. And then there'll be David himself plus a couple of other stars who will be introducing him for the second half of the evening. And of course you're welcome to stay and party as long as you can. This year's Register is the first of 2 volumes on the crisis. This one is called The Crisis This Time, a title that's deliberately intended to imply that this is not the last capitalist crisis. And it's partly, therefore, a dig at capitalism, but also a dig at the left's interpretation of crises as often being understood to be, this is the big one, this is the last one, this is the crisis to end all crises, etc. That said, the essays in this year's volume, and there are 15 of them by 25 people, take this crisis very seriously. An essay by Anwar Sheikh is called The First Depression of the 21st Century, and provide a deep analysis as well as a broad one of the nature of financialization and how it contributed to the current crisis, the way that took form and shape not only on Wall Street but also in the City of London, the way it played itself out throughout Europe and in South Africa. It looks at, through a remarkable essay by Joanna Brenner, the impact of the crisis on the American working class, and there are some very insightful and useful analyses on the assault on the public sector that has been the central exit strategy, as Greg and Brian term what's going on, of the politics of austerity that has been the capitalist state's response to the crisis almost everywhere. I thought I would just very briefly, before introducing my co-author, Sam Gindin, we have the opening piece in the volume, and then Greg Albo and Brian Evans, who have a remarkably broad piece on the nature of the exit strategies, as capitalists are calling them, looking at this in the United States, Britain, Ireland, and Greece. And after Sam, Brian will be speaking, and then Greg will conclude. I thought I would read just a few passages from the preface to give you a sense of how we motivated the volume. It's been 3 years since the crisis began, and there's no clear end in sight. Whether or not we're at the beginning of the first Great Depression of the 21st century remains to be seen, but what recovery there has been is halting and precarious, and we now live with the possibility of long-term stagnation. And make no mistake, for millions of workers across the world it has meant what crises always do, coming face to face with the fact that in capitalism, it's profits that matter, not people. The left has always recognized that crises mean, first and foremost, untold suffering by the most vulnerable sections of society, the scars of which remain long after the crisis abates. This is why serious socialists have never welcomed economic breakdown. But precisely because of their disruptive effects on business as usual, economic crises also present political opportunities. Since this crisis began, however, it is the ruling classes, not the labor movements, that have seized the crisis as an opportunity. Even while the public stands disgusted with the speculative orgy that neoliberalism unleashed, even while the mythology of market fundamentalism has been discredited, even while public sentiment is hostile to the bank bailouts, the response of capitalist states has been to shore up, however they can, the very model that brought the economy to ruins. In the very week in late June 2010, when we were writing this preface, the leaders of the G20 meeting in Toronto declared that their holding fast to free markets since the onset of the crisis had been, quote unquote, the right choice. And they pledged to, quote, renew for a further 3 years their commitments to refrain from raising barriers or imposing new barriers to investment or trade, and to rectify such measures as they arise. They also promised to minimize any negative impact on trade and investment on domestic policy action, including fiscal policy. Therefore, it's clear that they were endorsing, when the remarkable demonstrations were taking place and the remarkable police brutality took place with it, that they were marking a new age of austerity at that G20 meeting. An age of austerity that pretends a further assault on trade unions and the social entitlements of working people. So in this conjuncture, we need to have a sober appreciation of our weakness on the left. Whatever else goes into revitalizing the left, surely one part of it will be the development of an adequate analysis of the crisis in its political and economic dimensions. Next year's volume, which will also be on the crisis, will take the analysis further by looking at its impact on working classes socially and politically, while examining this in particular in the Middle East, Eastern Europe, Latin America, and China. And it'll also deepen the analysis of the epicenter of the crisis in the United States. We intend to explore further the left's response to the crisis so far, and the linkages between the economic crisis and the ecological crisis and the crisis of the city. This will set the stage for the 49th volume of the Socialist Register, which will come out in 2013, which will focus entirely on socialist strategy and organization for our time. Okay, with that introduction, let me first introduce Sam Gindin to talk about our essay in the volume.